Hey Akshat, nice to have you on the podcast. How you been?
Hey Arvind, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So I'm really excited to dive into, some of the questions I have for you today. But before we get into all of that, just for the benefit of our audience, could you share a little bit about your journey so far?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in India in New Delhi and went to school there, undergrad for my computer science. And then my first year on job was at Microsoft as a software engineer, which was super interesting time. I went to the US for my MBA, and beyond that, I realized I still love technology. I did kind of think about what might consulting look like, what might banking look like, but ultimately, I interned at Google during the summer as a product manager, and I just absolutely loved it. Like that was like the dream job that I could ever wish for. And at that point, it was like completely clear that building products is what I want to do rest of my life, or at least for a big part of my life. And that led me to kind of working at Google, build a whole bunch of stuff. Started on Android and Google Play, and then transitioned to education pretty quickly after that. So I've always been passionate about education. My mother's been a teacher, a veteran teacher for the longest time, and I've seen firsthand like what the impact of education can be on someone. It makes the world more equitable of a place. So I joined Google for education, and I loved it for its like social impact and user focus. So I led a whole bunch of kind of efforts there around Google Forms, Google Classroom, other initiatives, and we'll maybe talk about some of the learnings from there as well.
You've also recently started your own venture. You're doing a startup now called UpHop. So what is UpHop about? What does it do?
So UpHop is essentially this kind of AI native platform. We're empowering L&D and enablement teams to create these interactive one-on-one AI trainers that drive team upskilling, confidence, and performance. So that's our kind of core focus with UpHop.
Awesome. One of the things that really like stood out when I was doing some research on your profile in preparation for this is that your profile says that you're a product builder at heart who loves hair on fire customer problems. So which made me curious. What was the first hair on fire problem you remember tackling, and what were some of the learnings from that?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question, and yes, that phrase really gets to the core of what drives me, and something which I have to also keep reminding myself as I think about what to build and what needs to solve for. So to answer your specific question, I remember my early days at Microsoft, and we were working on Windows Azure cloud platform. Specifically, we were building cloud cache services, and we had built this incredible, powerful, scalable infrastructure. And from our perspective, it was like an engineering kind of marvel, right? But I got on a call with a e-commerce company that was trying to use it, and their business was growing. Their website kept crashing during peak traffic, and that's where cache could have helped. And they saw our offering as a potential solution, but they were completely lost. So the documentation was dense. The interface that we built to kind of set that up was for expert engineers, and which you still need, but nonetheless, it wasn't the best experience out there at the time. And their small team was spending a lot of time kind of trying to figure out how to make this product work for them. And that was like a hair on fire kind of moment, right? So their business was on the line, and our brilliant technology was kind of, you know, felt like a barrier than a solution. And it taught me an important lesson there. Like, you can have the most advanced technology, but if you're not building something which is intuitive, laser focused on solving the exact problems in the way users would understand, that is challenging. So that's the builder I've kind of aspired to be over time, someone who closes this gap between the potential and the reality for the user.
Yep, built for a need, right? Totally get it. So you were leading Google Classroom when its user base exploded from 40 million to 150 million, seemingly like overnight. And it must have been like quite an accelerating feeling, at least being a part of that team. So what was it like at that time to be on that team?
I mean, it was something which I had never imagined, to be honest. It was like one of the best experiences that I've had in my professional life, but also the most, unnerving in some sense. So when I stepped into the role, the pandemic had not started. And, and this was as soon as I joined, uh, we started seeing, schools shut down globally. And this feeling of kind of immediately seeing the user base grow so tremendously was still feels surreal. And the feeling inside the team at that time was like this mix of controlled chaos and absolute clarity in some sense. So we were drinking from the fire hose every single day. The servers were straining, onboarding tickets were flooding from school systems across the globe. But that is also what brought the team together. Like we were a completely united and unit working really well together, and really trying to achieve this singular mission of keeping schools in session for the world in some sense. And I found that to be pretty unifying for our team overall. So questions would be like, what's the most critical thing we can do in the next 24 hours to kind of help teachers in Italy, or a student in Brazil, or a parent in India, right? Kind of being in that situation in the trenches, solving real problems out there, and urgent problems. It was definitely one of the best experiences I've had in my career.
Was there a specific, story or, learning that stuck with you during that time that influenced the way you now think about UpHop?
I mean, in some sense it was, in some sense it was not. If you go and talk to teachers, and I've spoken to so many teachers, and even in higher ed, like a similar problem exists, which is teachers want to differentiate their instruction, they want to differentiate their content, because every kid is different, right? And they see it as their job to kind of support everyone grow, right? And that might look different for different students. So back in like 2021, 22, how could you differentiate to the groups of students or individual students? That was super, super hard, right? Never possible. How do you personalize instruction and learning? That was never possible. The best you could do is maybe create some, groups of students in your LMS system and assign differentiated materials. But is this so onerous for anyone to do that? Creating those materials, assigning those materials, creating these groups and tracking progress. So by far, if you go and talk to teachers, that's the number one need they will talk about. And this is a really good segue into kind of thinking about how, technology can help real world problems. So AI has been like transformative on that dimension, right? Teachers are now really able to kind of differentiate instruction like never before, and personalized learning. And you can extend that to not just, students, but in higher ed, in workplace. So if you have, let's just say a sales rep who's, so yeah, in some sense, that insight, if you extend that insight, personalization and differentiation has always mattered in any form of learning. And that is what we're doing with UpHop as well, which is really enabling these personalized kind of learning paths, practice paths that drive performance and ultimately business impact.
Yeah, I completely agree. I also, as you were saying that, right, what I realized is that now with AI, it unlocks so many different learning paths that wasn't there before, right? I guess like back in the day, if you're a sales rep and you're trying to like, get like a touch and feel for like what it is, what it feels like to be on the field, you'd probably shadow another sales rep, right? And that's where you'd get some of that rich contextual information. But now with AI, you can probably go a little further, like try and, simulate some of these real world conversations or whatnot. And
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll actually send you a link after the call, but we just launched these AI role plays, which essentially enable you to practice based on scenarios or companies. Imagine, you're working at Zomato. Let me just take that as an example for the Indian context. And you're a sales development manager or rep who works with restaurants to kind of, sell new services that Zomato is building. Previously, how would you get coached into one, understanding all the offerings that Zomato has that you should think about in context of a customer? And two, how do you actually practice apart from being in front of the customer itself? And now you can do that. You can get like super personalized learning paths, even targeted to like, okay, here's my specific, chain of restaurants I'm working with. How should I pitch to them? And then you can actually get into a role play which is based on that and practice live and get feedback on how you did and what you should improve on.
yeah, absolutely. So when someone lands on your website, when someone lands on UpHop, they see AI agents for all your team training needs. So what's actually happening under the hood? How are you able to like personalize this part for each individual?
Yeah, that's a great question. So essentially, if you think about like an enablement lead or an L&D lead kind of, landing on our website, essentially the journey starts by them uploading their specific company materials that they might have based on which they want to create training. So let's say if you have a new product launch happening in your organization and you want to create sales enablement training based on that, right? So you would basically just upload the product launch doc. If you have like a go-to-market strategy doc, you would upload that. And what's happening under the hood is our AI is kind of thinking about, what is the core content? What are you trying to cover here? We also go back and forth with the user just to understand the context a little bit more. So there's an agentic flow there. in terms of understanding who your target audience is, what their prior experience is, and based on all that information that you provided, our AI comes up with these training and learning objectives, right? For where the focus of the training should be, and you can change it, you can override it, and in all of this, like human control absolutely is like critical, but you can get set up and get started really quickly. And then essentially, once you confirm that you're good with the overarching kind of plan for the training, our AI agent behind the scene goes and figures out what learning path would make sense if that were the objectives of the training. And it's rationalizing right from what text to use, what images to use, what kind of questions to ask, whether to kind of do role plays or not, whether to have a gamified, generated game where you can practice. Like it's rationalizing where what would make sense, and then comes up with this learning path. So that's on the creation side. Then, as a learner, we have this trainer, which talks to you and kind of goes back and forth. So we're making that, kind of super personalized as well, in that you can ask it questions as you're going through it. So let's say if you had a question about the product launch, like how be compatible with GDPR in EU or whatever your question might be, right? So based on the materials that you provided, it can answer those questions. And in terms of practice, we've built that as like adaptive experience as well, with AI kind of playing a role. And that I want to emphasize that point a little bit, because now, previously what you would have is these short quizzes you would do after doing some training, right? Just to check whether you got something or not. But now imagine you actually have a trainer that you can interact with, and the trainer can tell whether you mastered something or not. So that equation kind of changes completely in terms of how well you can upskill, right? So we kind of have this adaptive practice, which our AI agent is kind of thinking about as well, when you're interacting with it and making sure that you got what you needed to know.
Yeah, that's actually very powerful. It also makes me think, right? When you're in this interaction mode with the AI agent, how do you prevent confident nonsense? Right? How do you prevent hallucinations? What's your approach to grounding it and ensuring that the content from the AI is actually factual?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great question. We do it in a few different ways. I'll maybe describe a couple of ways in which we do it. I mean, first of all, this is like a table stakes kind of a consideration for price, because if you're hallucinating on training content, then that is not good. You're impacting the business negatively rather than positively. But we kind of take great amount of care in that. So we ground whatever the training happens, whatever the content gets created, based on the materials that you provided. And that's the key, right? Which is like we're using the intelligence of AI to curate all of it, but it's based on your materials. And that's the kind of core idea there. And second, we have like rigorous evals as well that we do. And that's like a super interesting for people who are, kind of just getting into the AI development space or thinking about it. Evals is definitely the name of the game, where you kind of set the bar of what good looks like for any of your capability, and then you kind of rigorously evaluate to see if you're kind of meeting the bar that you set in terms of that level of quality that you want to deliver. And one more thing that I would add there is, we truly believe that human in the loop is absolutely necessary, right? That's where the expertise comes in, and that's the shift that we're seeing now, right? Which is more from this cumbersome work that sales enablement or L&D would have to do previously to kind of come up with all of this content. AI can help come up with all that content, like take you 95% or even 99% of the way there. And then you need to make sure that for the last 1%, you get it across the board. And so what we're doing there is taking this approach of human in the loop, because that's just critical in enterprise kind of context.
Got it. Makes sense. So your product, right, actually addresses everything from technical skills to sales enablement, right? And that makes me wonder, right, what varies across domains? Is there like a standardized core to learning that you guys implement in your approach?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think in some sense, it's a manifestation of how broad the AI knowledge is. When we talk about like artificial superintelligence, right?
Hmm.
It is like multi-domain, like covering all the domains of human intelligence, right? So in some sense, models are making progress in a lot of different domains, which makes us possible to be able to build experience for a wide variety of use cases. But essentially, I mean, if you step back, from a learning journey perspective, right, a few things still matter across the board in whatever you're learning. One is that you want to drive things to engagement. The more engaging your experiences, the more the chances are that people are going to learn. And we do that through like a variety of ways. We do it through, right from thinking about the outlines and how we can make the content engaging to adding things which lend themselves to more engagement from a gamification perspective. So we have this notion of, streaks that keep you going every day. We have this notion of, experience points that you collect as you kind of answer questions correctly or not. So we are also emphasizing a lot on that side of the house to make sure users feel motivated from a delightful experience perspective. So if I step back, there's a lot of commonality in how people learn and what keeps them motivated to learn, right? And that cuts across the board. So essentially, our goal is to actually cut through all the boring enterprise training that has happened for decades and really bring it to like the next generation experience, which is engaging, personalized, interactive, right? And that's what we're going for here. We're not just thinking about how do we bring AI to the equation. We're kind of reimagining that entire training experience in some sense.
Is it fair to say that the mission of UpHop is to combat job displacement caused by AI?
I think that's a great question. And, I do think like from a societal perspective, one of the biggest challenges that we have now is what is the impact of AI going to be on jobs and the future of human work. But on the flip side, you can also think about AI being this kind of an immense source of knowledge and intelligence, which can help people themselves learn better. And that's what we're looking to tap into with UpHop. So we absolutely believe that AI is a force for good for learning and can supercharge learning, make it 10x better than how it used to happen before. Because fundamentally, from a first principles perspective, you just now have this abundance of intelligence that can help you learn and teach you things better than ever before. So yes, in some sense, our mission has been how can AI actually help people learn better and upskill better for the future, especially in this world where jobs and roles and skills are going to evolve massively and super quickly over the next several years.
Awesome. Yeah, so at UpHop, you're focusing on corporate L&D, right? So does that mean you're betting that businesses and not traditional academic institutions will be at the forefront of defining essential skills of the future that becomes more critical than, say, a traditional four-year degree?
Yeah, I definitely think we are in this era of constant upskilling now. We are going to be for a while, but I wouldn't frame it as a bet against academia, which you know
Mhm.
provides the essential foundation for a lot of things, like for learning, for your self development in some sense as well. I do think curriculums will have to shift at a pace that they've never had in the past, but still, that foundations that you learn still matter in the academia. I would say what you're betting on is that businesses on the front line are going to be faced with the skills revolution, right? So the pace of change in business today is just staggering. This, products changing, strategies changing, entire roles evolving in quarters. And, you can, a 4-year degree program can't be rewritten every 6 months, and it shouldn't be. But businesses, however, feel the pain of skills gap immediately on their bottom line. And they have the most urgent kind of need and the strongest incentive in some sense to kind of implement continuous on the job upskilling. And that is why we think, that's where the impact is going to be the largest, and hence our focus on the corporate learning and workforce development.
So when you talk about upskilling, right, especially in the AI era, are we talking about, say, everyone learning to code and prompt engineering, or is it kind of doubling down on human-centric skills like creativity, strategic thinking, and leadership? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And my answer there is yes and both. So in some sense, for nearly everyone, we have to kind of, start thinking about how we can use AI as a tool in becoming better at our current jobs. Think about AI as an assistant, a thought partner, a creative partner, and that applies to a lot of jobs across the board. If you can think about marketers who are using AI to draft copy of their, go-to-market messaging, or analysts kind of using it to think about spotting trends in data. All of that is possible now for your own productivity and impact, thinking about AI as a companion is absolutely table stakes at this point. But I would say, as we look towards the future, it is really about those human skills as well, right? Which is as AI starts handling some of these more routine tasks, what really becomes important are the human skills, the human connection, and the human judgment, which is going to be overseeing how AI operates and works and guide some of the AI agent kind of work. And at the same time, I would say the software and the more communication skills matter even more. So thinking about leadership, creativity, and empathy, they become more valuable than ever before. So I would say it's a combination of both of those as we look towards the future.
Got it. Yep. I think I tend to, agree with you on that. Or also, I feel like these human-centric skills that we're talking about, or soft skills, they will also have to adapt in a world where a lot of things are driven by AI.
Say more about that. I'm curious to get your perspective.
In a sense, think about it now, right? With when we write emails, most of the emails today are sort of AI driven, right? Like, refined by ChatGPT or refined by Gemini within your the mailbox that you're using. So, in a world where it becomes so easy to write and communicate your thoughts, maybe there is a different way to think about skills like communication, right? Where there's a baseline that's already set and that's like, accessible to most people. But then how do you leverage that and like actually differentiate the way you communicate? That is still, an art form. And I guess that's what people could explore.
Yeah, no, I think like how do human to human skills evolve? Yeah, no, I think that's a fascinating point. So, in some sense, AI can help you communicate a lot more efficiently now, right? But the effectiveness still matters. You need to be aware of the context, the situation, and how do you kind of handle it in a way that leads to kind of the right outcomes. It's kind of become even more important than ever in some sense, because that again the human judgment part of it is even more critical, because I you know for better or for worse, like, does not have all the context yet about a conversation that might be happening, and you have like all these signals, and your neurons have been trained on that data already. So I agree with you on that kind of human to human, how to use your communication more effectively rather than just efficiently, is more critical than ever.
So is the ultimate goal of UpHop to teach specific subjects, or is it to teach people how to learn?
So yeah, learning how to learn is absolutely, a fundamentally critical skill that people will need to have as we kind of think about the future. And that's kind of what we're enabling with UpHub. We're kind of taking things away from this, watching a boring video to actually making something that you can engage with. You can ask questions, and you can practice in simulations and role plays and things of that sort. So if you are willing to learn, we can most certainly kind of help you get where you need to be. At the end of the day, that meta skill for wanting to learn needs to exist in the first place.
Great. So finally, Akshat, for someone listening right now who may be a marketing manager or an accountant or so on, and who's feeling anxious about how AI might impact their job, what do you think is the most important step they should take to prepare for the future?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's how it shared in IT, I think, amongst all of humanity at this point, or a large chunk of humanity at this point. So, one, you're not alone. A lot of people are kind of feeling that. And two, I would say just kind of wholeheartedly embrace AI, right? It is here to stay. It is only going to get better. You need to kind of learn with it. You need to think about it as like, as I called previously, an alien brain that you can tap into for thought partnership, for creativity, for and collaborate really with it. So, and surprisingly, a lot of people are not have not gone deep enough and explored the full potential of what's even possible. So that's what I would say. Just have a commitment of, start using AI every single day in what you're doing, and you just naturally kind of lead to a path, or will be led to a path where, you see value and you keep exploring more and more. So at a high level, just be curious and embrace it.
Yep. Be curious and wholeheartedly embrace AI. That's a great note to leave it at, Akshat. Thank you so much for your time. It was a wonderful conversation and a lot of insights that I'm sure our audience will enjoy.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me, Arvind. This was a great chat.